What's up guys, Matt from the A-Team here, and you're watching 4-Minute Film School. Today, we're gonna go from this to this, and from this to this. We're talking color contrast. Let's go. One of the key aspects of cinematography is guiding the eye. This is why contrast is super important. When you create differences in your image, it allows your eye to look at different areas of the frame more selectively. This is most easily seen in the brightness versus the shadows of your image. But you can also easily achieve this with the color of your set. Today, we're shooting two different scenes using different color combinations of light, on a low budget and on a high budget, in order to figure out what color contrast does to your shot. Let's go. Now, you might think we're in my grandmother's house, but in actuality, we're in a studio, Justin Jones's studio, as a matter of fact. The first scene we're shooting is a daytime interior, and we're creating color contrast by mixing blue and orange light. This is one of the most common Hollywood techniques, and now you'll see it in pretty much every movie you see. The way you get blue and orange light is by using different color temperatures. Color temperature is really just a number that represents a warm orange color to a cold blue color. A 3200 Kelvin looks relatively orange, while a 5600 Kelvin looks pretty blue. You see this combination a lot because these are the two most common colors in our everyday lives. Sunlight has a relatively blue color to it for most of the day, while lights inside your house are typically a warmer, oranger color. For this scene, we're using blue light coming through the window to act as daylight, while orange light acts as a lamp inside our set. But the thing you have to keep in mind is what color temperature you had set your camera to. Setting your camera to, say, 3200 Kelvin will make your orange lights appear white, while setting your camera to 5600 Kelvin will make your blue lights also appear white. But there are two ways of getting around this. The first way is to make your orange lights super orange, or to make your blue lights super blue. That way, when you balance your camera towards, say, the orange lights, your blue lights will retain its blue color while the orange lights still look orange. The other way is to set your camera to a color temperature that's in between the two colors. Something like 4300 Kelvin. That way you retain some of the blue in your blue lights and some of the orange in your orange lights. We have legit tungsten lights, and that was a nice foundation to how we're gonna light this scene. Whatever color temperature these lights gave off is what we had to work with. Now you might think this is real daylight, but in actuality we just wanted to simulate real daylight by adding a little bit of blue into this warm room. And we're just using a 300X with the spotlight mount. One thing to know about the 300X is it's bicolored. We have the light set to 6500 Kelvin, but we noticed the color wasn't blue enough, so all we did was add a gel to get the blue we were looking for. So for our key light, we wanted to emulate the same type of sunlight coming through our previous window, and as you can see, we don't have another window. So we used a 300D Mark II with a soft blue gel to emulate that same light quality. We noticed our scene was a little too contrasty looking, so we wanted to add a subtle bounce coming from our key, hitting the bounce onto our talent. And lastly, we have our kicker light, which is set to a tungsten gelled light. This is to emulate the same practicals that were around our set. And all this does is serve as a kicker for our talent. So let's see that whole scene put together. So what do you do if you're on a budget? Well, we still have the 672 acting as our edge light, and it's also giving off the same color as our practicals. Moving on to the key light, we have a 672 with a blue gel taped on top. We still wanted some form of diffusion, so we added silk. Moving on to our window light, we didn't need any sort of diffusion, we just have the bare light outside, taped with a blue gel. We did, however, make sure we moved the light closer to the window compared to the spotlight. Let's take a look at that. For the second scene, we're shooting primarily with gelled lights. For colors outside natural color temperatures, you need to use gels. In this scene, we have a person in their locker room, and they've just discovered something glowing from their locker. We knew we wanted to be stylized with this shot, and we wanted the colors to be super saturated. And blue light's cool, right? Except there's no depth to this shot. There's no contrast. In fact, if you put a blue filter in front of your camera, you would have gotten the same thing. So we wanted to change one of the lights to be a different color to add some contrast to the scene. When you're shooting with different colored lights, you can really make it whatever you want. However, there are some color combinations that look really good, like yellow and green, reds and blues. For this scene, we chose to use red and blue light. We chose to have the room be primarily blue and the locker to be red. So when using RGB lights, one nice way to work with the camera's white balance is to set this light to a regular color temperature. In our case, we're using 5600 Kelvin. So the Nova allows us to add a gel on top of that color temperature. In this case, we're using a deeper blue. There's no actual physical gel on the light. It's just something that you can set in the Nova settings. It's not a perfect science, but it's a good place to start. Now for our key light, we wanted to use a nice bright red color. And for this, we're using the Aputure MCs. One thing to note about the MCs though is they don't have the gel feature that the Nova has. So we just kind of eyeballed it and used the Stylized link in the color picker. One super handy feature the MCs offer is the magnetized backside. Now one thing that brings the entire scene together is fog. We filled the entire room with fog just to give it that nice cinematic quality. And without further ado, let's take a look at that RGB color contrast. Okay, say you want to use color in your films, but you don't have any RGB lights. Well, now there's a lot of cheap RGB options on the market. But for a long time, RGB lights weren't all that easily accessible. Instead, we're doing it the old-fashioned way. We're putting gels on our lights. To replace our Nova, we used a 672. Really, you can use any light panel. This one is set to daylight, but to make it even more blue, we added a blue gel right on top. And then for our red light, we just used any other small little LED panel. In this case, we are using the Aputure MW. While the MC is a very affordable RGB option, we wanted to show you how you can achieve that same effect without an RGB option. We just used red gel. So in terms of cameras, we're using the Canon 7D. So in this case, we set our camera to 3200 Kelvin for our white balance, which really made the blue even more blue. It really makes it pop. The red gel is already pretty intense, so the white balance set to 3200 Kelvin isn't going to affect the red all that much. Let's check it out. Alrighty, let's recap. When using color contrast in your scenes, there's three main things to keep in mind. Number one, mixing the color of your lights can add a lot of dimension to your shots. It's an easy way to make your lighting more interesting without really changing anything. Number two, your camera's color temperature will have a big effect on the colors of your lights. Make sure you set your color temperature first and then change the colors of your lights afterwards to match. Number three, keep in mind which colors look best together. Complementary colors are a great place to start, but you can try different combinations depending on what you like. Today's comment question is, what scene has great color contrast? Comment below for a chance to win our classy Aputure M9. My personal favorite? Probably Blade Runner 2049, particularly when Kay's big pink girlfriend illuminates light on him and on the catwalk, but the background remains this nice blue tone. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you like and subscribe. Also, consider following us on social media for more lighting tutorials. I've been Matt with the A-Team. Thanks for watching 4 Minute Film School, and happy shooting.